Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of My Dream Log Cabin podcast. Excited to have you with us today. My name is Lindsay Sutherland, and I'm your host. And joining me today is Donna Peak. Donna is the editor-in-chief of Log and Timber Home Living magazine. She's also the editorial director of Active Interest Media's Log Timber Cabin Group. I challenge you to say that 5 times fast. Sounds really awesome. And I'm excited to have her with us today because she has 23 years of experience in this industry. And what's even more exciting and more relevant to you, our cabin lovers, is she's going to be here to talk about what's trending in the log home industry and what people like you are asking for. So it's really exciting. I'm happy to have you here, Donna. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Lindsay. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's my pleasure. This is going to be so fun. I know when we connected at the Log Home Show, it was definitely an exciting moment. We were both pretty jazzed and looking forward to this kind of conversation. So I'm excited to bring it full circle here today and dive in as we're going to jump into what is trending in the log home industry. So tell me a little bit, if you don't mind, about the survey and kind of what you guys have been doing, because you guys have been doing this for quite some time, right?
We have been doing this for a long time. I want to say somewhere in the neighborhood of about 25 years. We have been conducting a biennial, every other year survey of just what's going on in the industry. And we poll as many log home manufacturers, even timber home manufacturers, and other people that are in this world of, log and timber frame homes. We ask them, what are you seeing? What are the trends that you have? Emerging, what is on the decline, and how does business look? What is the demand? What are people, like clamoring to get one of these homes? There's definitely, we always kind of laugh about the way that TV and movies affect this industry, because back in the early 2000s, when the baby boom generation was sort of entering into, their 50s, there was a surge of log home interest because they grew up on shows like Bonanza and other shows that really glamorized, Little House on the Prairie, things like that really glamorized the rustic, sort of Western lifestyle. And that, log homes were sort of a very integral part in that. And now, here we are in the 2020s, and now we have Yellowstone. And there's a whole new cadre of young people that have an intense interest in this sort of lifestyle because they're watching Yellowstone, and it's doing the same thing for the 30-somethings and the 40-somethings that Bonanza did for the 30 and 40-somethings 25 years ago. So yeah, there's this whole new fresh audience that, is loving these types of homes, loving this lifestyle. And we've seen that. We actually do 2 surveys, I should say. There's the industry survey that we conduct, and we also poll our readers regularly to find out what they're interested in. And an interesting thing happened in our poll this year is that our demographic for the magazine and the websites, it actually skewed lower in terms of age demographic than it has in a very long time. In fact, 54% of the people who completed our survey were under age 45. Usually our audience, usually our audience is, in the 50s, maybe just approaching retirement age. It kind of flows with that. But now there's this whole group, half the people that were interested in giving their opinion were actually under the age of 45. So that was an exciting thing for us to see. And we attribute a lot of that to this new renewed excitement around that rustic wood home lifestyle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. That's really fascinating. I never really thought about the correlation between TV or movies and the industry, but it really makes a lot of sense. I think too, there's so much that's been changing in our society, and people have this like innate inner calling, at least that was my case, to a drive, I suppose, to go live in the woods and just kind of get back to our roots and live a simpler life. I just think so many more people are we still want our luxuries, don't get me wrong, but
yeah, definitely. They want to give that rustic, and the best thing is that these houses aren't that rustic.
We want the ambiance.
Right. Well, we have kind of gotten really tired of talking about the pandemic, and the impact that it has had, because of course we're all a little exhausted from that whole period in our lives, but it really did make people realign their priorities. And it also gave the freedom to be able to pursue this. I think is another reason why this demographic is skewing a little bit younger, is the fact that a lot of people can work from home now. They don't have to be tied to a city in their youth the way that, we historically think of people, in a working environment. They can live in the woods, and they can still, as long as you can get a decent internet, signal, then, or a decent cell signal, you can conduct business from anywhere now.
Mhm.
And so people aren't waiting to make this happen. They're not waiting for retirement. They want to be able to enjoy their lives on their terms as soon as they possibly can. And, that's definitely a switch that we've seen into our readers and the people who visit our websites and our social media.
That's exciting. I also
Yeah.
think it's interesting to, because as we're going to continue this conversation, kind of having that little nugget in our minds, I think really plays into some of the other trends you're seeing. So you were telling me something about traditional log homes versus more of a hybrid model, and how the statistics are kind of skewing in a different direction. You want to elaborate a little bit on that?
So yeah, there's a definite demand for hybrid home construction, and increasing demand for hybrid home construction. I mean, the hybrids have been around for a long time, and it's a little bit of a weird word, simply because it can mean so many things depending on what the industry is. Of course, when you think about cars, hybrid means one thing. When you think about fruits and vegetables, like there are hybrid tomatoes, that means something else. But at the end of the day, it just basically means multiple types of, in our case, construction are converging into one home. And so that can look like a, partial log home, like a full log wing of a home that's tied into maybe a timber frame, or something like a, conventionally framed inner structure of the house that's then clad in, half logs, either on the outside with something different on the inside, or maybe logs on both sides. But, a lot of it can be driven by local building codes, by, energy requirements and certain things like that, or just, desire, because some people are looking for that level of diversity in their living environment. They want logs, but maybe they don't want logs everywhere. Maybe they want, some timber and some drywall and some stuff in some other areas. So it's really driven a lot by what you're able to build in the location where you want to be, and then what you want to build and the type of home you want to live in. So the thing that, we were a little bit, I wouldn't say surprised, but the numbers kind of surprised us. When we did this poll in 2021, log home producers were saying that 26% of their business was in the hybrid sort of model. In the survey this year, that shot up to 57%.
Wow.
So that demand is definitely, being driven by consumer preferences, and then the industry is responding to that by being able to provide exactly what those buyers are looking for.
Out of curiosity, and you guys may not have asked this, but I'm just a generally curious person, so these things come up. But do you know if they're more interested in the hybrid with like a square dovetail look versus a round log, or do you guys explore anything like that?
We didn't ask it in that level of depth. That might be something we want to consider for the future, so we know if there's a trend toward one or the other. I mean, some of it is driven a little bit by upkeep, future maintenance. And, with a full log home, on any full log home, whether it's square or round or whatever, there is going to be some settlement that goes along with that, and some adjustments that a homeowner is going to have to make as those logs sort of settle. That's one of those things that, our audience gets a little nervous about, to be honest. And what we try to explain to them is that all homes settle. Like if you're in a stick framed house, like a normal brick and mortar house, and you look at your drywall and you have a nail pop that comes through, well, that's your home settling. It's like all homes settle. So it's not really anything to get really scared about. It's just something to be aware of. That said, some people just really don't want to have to deal with the foreign idea of trying to adjust a log home as it settles. And so, they may be more of a candidate for a hybrid home where that's not as big of a concern as it is with a full log home.
Right.
So I think that I don't really know how much it depends on the style or, the log profile that they really care about one way or the other. I think it has more to do with, long-term understanding of how to maintain the house.
Right. Well, I just have to plug Caribou Creek here. Because they have a solution to that.
There you go.
I can't turn out myself, but it's, we have a non-settling design. They can get a whole
Yeah.
log cabin and there's no settling. But it is true that a lot of people don't know that because there is that general misnomer that log homes settle. This is what you're going to deal with. So, at least now they know that there's options, a hybrid home, or you can look at a full non-settling design and compare them and see which one suits your fancy.
Yep.
So on that note, another really interesting thing I thought was really cool, kind of, we highlighted some of these discussion topics before we jumped on today. And I was really intrigued by the fact that your statistics are indicating that there's a pretty similar price per square foot between traditional homes and log homes. And I want you to elaborate on that, but I also am curious if that is a comparison to hybrid or full log.
I'd have to go back and dig into the research to see, and I can do that while we sit here and talk. But we looked at an average cost per square foot across the industry, and that covers, the whole breadth of the log home industry, from people that are providing handcrafted, full scribed, the bigger diameter logs, to those that are providing maybe like a 6 or 8 inch milled log. It all depends on, what the wood species is that is being worked with and what a particular manufacturer leans towards. As some are, milled and planed and uniform. Others prefer like the handcrafted, every log is unique, kind of situation. So across the board, it was interesting that, there's been, and not unrightly so, that, log homes are more expensive than your average, regular stick frame house. But, over the past couple of years in particular, with rising costs, import tariffs that we were dealing with over the past year, trying to get stuff in from Canada, dealing with import tariffs there, just general price increases based on availability or what have you, whatever the circumstances are, the cost per square foot for a full log home versus, a regular custom construction home. We're not talking about like a tract home or, that type of thing, but a true custom home. They're completely in line with each other, like literally within a couple dollars. There's really no measurable difference between a log home versus a custom home that's not made of logs. So that was interesting because it just makes log homes a lot more competitive in the market, where if somebody was looking at, trying to decide they want a custom home, they have a piece of land they want to build on, they're trying to decide what they want to put on it. And a log home would be nice, but I just don't think that I can swing the cost. Well, now those costs are so comparable, there really is no difference. Mm-hmm. You asked me about whether it was log or hybrid. Generally speaking, hybrid homes, there's a little bit of savings to be had there. Usually they run a little bit less per square foot than a log home. But we always joke, because I get this question every show I go to. They walk up to me because I'm impartial, right? I'm not tied to a particular company. So they're like, so how much does a log home really cost?
And it's the $1 million question.
I know. And so I always say, I'm like, well, how much does a car cost? And they say, well, it depends on the kind of car. And I was like, bingo. That's the thing, a log home can be as affordable or as expensive as you want to make it. There is, certain costs that are involved with the actual building materials, but the way that you fit and finish it, you can have solid gold fixtures if you'd like, if you're really so inclined, and drive up the cost per square foot just because of the types of, faucets that you're putting in the house. But, so the really, materials to materials is where we are seeing the cost per square foot parallel, where the two are really evening out. And then from there, it's up to the buyer to decide exactly how much that house is really going to cost.
I'm really glad you said that, Donna, because I had done right around during COVID or right around that time, we had reached out to one of a builder we know here that does luxury homes. He's worked with us on some of them that were log, but most of them were not. And he actually told us at that time that we were less expensive.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that was, remember back when like building costs were just skyrocketing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what has happened, I think, and I'm grateful to hear that this is still in a line, even, 2, 3 years later, because although traditional building costs have come down somewhat, it hasn't been to what it was pre-COVID. But interestingly enough, log prices have stayed very steady. I mean, they've increased, but not nearly what this like the 2x4s and the plywood and all of the other things that go into insulation. All of those costs have gone up so exponentially that
Yeah.
it's really kind of worked in our favor. So I think that's really interesting to see that that's still a trend right now, and I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, I have to think, and I could be wrong about this, but I have to think that part of that might have to do with handling. Because when you think about a builder getting 2x4s to build a house, he goes and gets them from the lumber mill, who then passes on an upcharge to the builder because they got them from the forest, the forestry company or wherever they're getting their materials from, that had an upcharge, and so those costs just keep getting exponentially larger along the way, where most of the log home companies that I know, there's not as many middlemen in between getting the raw material and then fabricating the material into a house. You don't have as many layers of upcharges as you would, just having a builder go to the Home Depot, that goes to the distributor, that goes to the lumber, and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm. That's a good point. Also, another thing that we've noticed that I think adds to what you were saying is, and I don't really see how this trend, because in my mind, I'm thinking if I build a custom home, the finishes I would want would be custom or high end. But there is a difference with the log home. People really up level, and a lot of times it's custom. So, like, you want the antler chandelier. Well, that isn't just something you go to IKEA for, or,
Right.
like something places where you can even get high end. I'm thinking back into my Arizona days in Scottsdale, the nice finishing places where it could be still a few $100s for a lamp. I mean, now we're talking a few $1,000s for a chandelier or something like that. There's
Yeah.
a difference there, and it goes across the board with everything from counters to cupboards to flooring, and all of that is where it gets really, you start to see a real big increase. So something that we've talked about on the podcast, and for those of you listening, if you're excited about this, you really want to dive into, a log cabin for yourself, just be mindful going into it, and, give yourself a budget. That's usually what we recommend. Give yourself a budget for your fixtures, give yourself a budget for your flooring. And if you want help determining that budget, if you head over to cariboucreek.com, right on our front page, we do have a budget built in where you can actually input what you want to spend, and it'll tell you what percentage of your total should go to flooring, should go to, the logs and et cetera, so that you can kind of really get clear on what you need to do and what you can spend in those areas. So
We do something similar in the magazine, where in our buyer's guides, we do 2 buyer's guides a year. One's completely devoted to log, one's completely devoted to timber framing. And in both of them, while we can't tell you how much to spend, because we do get that cost question so often, we started doing exactly what you're talking about, where, okay, this is about how much you're going to want it percentage wise. So you come up with your number. How much are you really willing to spend? Okay, once you have that number, this is how much of that percentage is going to be eaten up by the log package. This is how much you want to make sure you allocate to countertops and everything that you just said. So, I mean, that's at least, helpful for them to try to wrap, because it is a hard thing. There's so many things when you're building a custom home that you don't even think about. You have to choose everything right down to the handles that are on your, cabinet. And every little thing needs to be considered. And that can get a little overwhelming, unless you're prepared for it. And, these kinds of tools that we're talking about are a great way to prepare. When you said about budget too, one thing I wanted to bring up that is just kind of funny, and I don't really know why people do this, but when they approach a company, when they're looking to, really talk numbers, let's say they have a building budget, a total all-in budget of $400,000. Well, they might go to the company and say, yeah, my budget's $300,000. They feel this need to sort of lie about their budget, or at least not be completely truthful about how much they're really willing and able to spend because they feel like if they tell you and the greater you, that, this is how much I have, they're somehow going to get taken or, they're going to be out to just spend every bit of that. But that is such a disservice to everybody involved, whether it's your law company, your builder, or whomever, because if they think that that is the budget that you're working within. I know one of the builders that I talk with frequently, he's really good on the fly. Like he's the kind of builder that will make recommendations in order to be able to get a customer, exactly what they want within their budget. So if he thinks that you only have a, $300,000 budget, that you have really $400,000, he's going to make recommendations based on that $300,000. And there's a very good chance you might be disappointed in that house or feel like, you didn't really get everything you wanted. But how could you when everybody that's involved doesn't really realize what your true budget is? So we always advise everybody, just be honest. Nobody's really out to get you. Nobody's really looking to try to, take more than you're willing to give. But, just tell somebody, okay, well, I have $400,000 to work with. I'd like to stay closer to 300 or 350, but I do have this contingency. So then if there are trade-offs or things that have to happen, at least everybody that's involved knows that there is money there to work with.
It's so true. That is a really good point. You mentioned the car analogy earlier. A lot of my background was in the automotive industry. And I think that people are so used to buying cars.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's where it comes from.
They're going to try to raise your limit every day, but it is very different. It is very different. The builders would much rather give you what you want than just try to take your money. That's really just such a different mindset. The people
yeah. I mean, the car dealer, like you said, they're just going to, you drive off the lot and then it's like, okay, see you, but dealing with building a custom home, you're actually building relationships. You have to trust your builder and your builder has to trust you, and you have to trust that everybody that's involved in the process wants a good outcome for you. Nobody wants a bad outcome. So they want to make sure that, you're getting everything that is feasibly possible within the confines of what your budget actually is. So it doesn't do anybody any good to not be honest about that.
And that is even true when you're doing the design phase. That's really especially true in the design phase, because that's where a lot of those little things like add up quickly or could be easily added in the design phase and maybe not be as expensive as somebody might think. There's just so many layers to it. So 100%. Yeah. I was going to ask you so tell me more about the magazine. Kind of what do you guys, how often do your episodes I call them episodes. Look at me.
They're used to podcasts.
How often do you produce your magazine? What are certain months that they should really be looking for? Because I'm pretty sure this is a really prime time too, isn't it? Like the time everybody's looking at log cabins coming up in the winter and around Christmas time.
Yeah. I mean, Christmas time is kind of funny because your focus isn't really on getting a house. It's like nobody's really looking to move or looking to kind of take that financial thing on when you're also trying to shop for the holidays. But as soon as, December passes, that's when, it really, people are, most of the country, is in some level of winter, unless you're really fortunate enough to live in the Florida Keys, then, you're probably not experiencing winter like the rest of us. But, there's some level of hibernation that happens in January, February. So there's no better time to sit down with a magazine and just kind of, curl up. It's funny, a lot of people think, print is dead. There's no room for magazines in today's, internet driven age. But another thing about the survey that we do is we ask people, how do you prefer to get your content? And even though the survey is conducted digitally, it's completely an online survey, the majority of the people that we surveyed prefer to get this kind of content in print. It's like neck and neck with online. And the reason is because it kind of makes sense, log and timber frame homes, they're very tactile experiences. It's something that you want to walk up and touch. And the print is the same way, you just can't curl up with your laptop or with your tablet. It's just not the same experience. So people use our media for, a variety of different things. So when it comes to print, it's very inspirational. And so we know that, and we try to make sure that we've got big photos full of details. We draw attention to as many details as we possibly can and really kind of get you immersed in the photo and the experience of the home. And then with everything that we put online, it's more of like a nitty gritty, down and dirty. I need to know, what do I do, with, how do I insulate my roof in a log home? It's something very driven by the need to answer a question, where, in print, it's like, how do I really get the home of my dreams, and what are other people doing, and how can I find that level of inspiration? So those are the ways that we use. And then our social media, we put everything out there. It's like we put out questions and answers, that people are asking us in real time, links to particular articles that seem to have some traction. And, if people are coming to us looking for this particular answer, maybe you are too. So we throw it out there so people are aware that we can answer these questions. And then just, links to gorgeous photos like the homes that you produce. So, I mean, you can't.
there is definitely something about a magazine, and like being able to, even when you're just touching the paper, you can almost feel like you're experiencing that.
Yeah. It's an experience for sure.
Plus, I love the idea of cutting them out. I have one right here on my wall. Like, I'm living in my dream home. This was my dream home, but now, after working at Caribou Creek, I have like a level up dream now.
Isn't that funny how that happens working in this kind of industry? It's like, oh, I love my house, but I could do this, or I could do that. Or,
so I've drawn out my whole floor plan. I have my picture on my wall. Like, I have no pictures on my wall except this one, because this is where I'm headed, right?
Yeah, it's dangerous. It's dangerous.
Is. Good. It's good.
Maybe you have it all figured out. Somebody else does something cool and exciting, and then you're like, "Ooh, I could do that too."
Yes. Oh man, that's what magazines are the best about. So, how often do you guys produce a magazine? How frequently can people look for them on the shelves?
We have 8 regular issues. Well, we have 6 regular issues and 8 throughout the course of the year, but those 2 extra issues, those are the buyer's guides that I mentioned before. So our September issue is completely dedicated to log room information. Our December issue, which we're getting ready to print in about a week and a half, is dedicated to timber frame information. And then the other 6 issues throughout the year combine both log and timber frame into one magazine. So we cover everything, like I said, from inspirational stories of people who have already, built their dream home and are living that dream and are, just thrilled to pieces about that and sort of how that comes together. And we even try to cover some topics for those people who are living, in a house. So, we have landscaping ideas, maintenance ideas, design ideas that are both interior decorative as well as some structural, because we do have a new crop of people who are adding on or renovating. Renovation is actually a really hot thing right now. A lot of people are looking to renovate or add on to a home that they currently own, or build an ADU, an accessory dwelling unit, which is like a guest house, for lack of a better word, out in the back. Of course, you don't really have to use it as a guest house. It could be for an aging parent, for a boomerang kid who, just trying to keep the family together. Family compounds are huge now. And I don't know if that is sort of a residual effect of the pandemic as well, where people want to have their families close, but maybe not within the same house. They're buying big tracts of land and divvying it up among themselves and their kids. And they're all within, like a couple acres of each other. They might buy like a 5-acre tract and, put 2 or 3 houses on it. So that's a big trend that we're seeing as well. Lots of interesting things that are going on in this industry, considering, how many hundreds of years log homes have been around, and you think they don't really fundamentally change all that much, but and in some ways they don't, and that's the beauty of them. But in a lot of ways, today's buyers are just, and the designers and architects and manufacturers are all getting so creative about how to take what essentially is just another building medium and turning it into some really exceptional architecture. It's just amazing.
Wow, that is so cool. You just made me feel so excited about this industry even more. Like, I didn't know that was possible.
I've been doing this for a long time, and I still look at these places and I'm like, wow.
I mean, what is it about them? They're so captivating. I 100% with you on that. Well, Donna, if people want to subscribe to the magazine now, what's the best place for them to go?
We have a couple different websites, but I'll just give you one that's the easiest. It's just go to loghome.com. And when you get on that main page, right up in the upper left-hand corner, there's a button to subscribe. You can go up there. So that's the easiest way. You can find us in, major bookstores, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million, all that stuff. You can find us in some select grocery stores. Weirdly, like a lot of grocery stores aren't carrying newsstands the way that they used to. So we're kind of in selected areas. So you may or may not find us there. But if you go to any bookstore, you should be able to find us there off the shelf. But really subscribing from our website is the easiest way to ensure you're going to get your copies. I mean, that's the no fail way to make that happen.
Excellent. This has just been an incredible episode. I'm so grateful we connected and that we are having this conversation.
Yeah.
I look forward
We're
to
going to do
our
this a lot. So
conversation.
yeah.
This is fun. Wow.